Maya manak hrijati karma mayam bilaya kalena chodita gunanu matena pongsa chandro mayam yadaja sojasharam sangsara chakramachako titadet turanyaha sangsara chakramachato titadet turanyaha sangsara chakramachako titadet turanyaha. O Lord, O Supreme Eternal, by expanding your plenary portion, you have created the subtle bodies of living entities through the agency of your external energy, which is agitated by time. Thus the mind entraps the living entity in unlimited varieties of desires to be fulfilled by the Vedic directions of karma kanda, fruitive activity, and the 16 elements. Who can get free from this entanglement unless he takes shelter at your lotus feet? Purport. If the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in everything, where is the question of being liberated from material entanglement to spiritual blissful life? Engagement. Wow, did you hear that? Good catch. 5 points for each legitimate catch, but we can't change anything though. If the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present in everything, where is the question of being liberated from material engagement to spiritual blissful life? Indeed, it is a fact that Krishna is the source of everything, as we understand from Krishna himself in Bhagavad Gita, Aham sarvasya prabhavo. All the activities in both the spiritual and material world are certainly conducted by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the agency of either the material or spiritual nature. As further confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Maya jakshina prakriti suyate sacharacharam. Without the direction of the Supreme Lord, material nature cannot do anything. It cannot act independently. Therefore, in the beginning, the living entity wanted to enjoy the material energy, and to give the living entity all facility, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, created this material world and gave the living entity the facility to concoct different ideas and plans through the mind. These facilities offered by the Lord to the living entity constitute the 16 kinds of perverted support in terms of the knowledge-gathering senses, the working senses, the mind, and the 5 material elements. The wheel of repeated birth and death is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but to direct the bewildered living entity in progress toward liberation according to varied stages of advancement. Different directions are given in the Vedas. Chandomayam. If one wants to be elevated to the higher planetary systems, he may follow the Vedic directions. As the Lord states in Bhagavad Gita 9:25, Yanti deva vrita devan petrin yanti pritivrita bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajinopimam yanti madhyajinopiman yanti madhyajinopimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among such demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors, and those who worship me will live with me. The real purpose of the Vedas is to direct one back home, back to Godhead. But the living entity, not knowing the real goal of his life, wants to go sometimes here and sometimes there, and do sometimes this and sometimes that. In this way he wanders throughout the entire universe, imprisoned in various species, and thus engaging in various activities for which he must suffer the reactions. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Brahmanda Brahmite Konya Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Paya Bhakti Lata Beach. The fallen conditioned living entity trapped by the external energy, loiters in the material world. But if by good fortune he meets a bona fide representative of the Lord who gives him the seed of devotional service, and if he takes advantage of such a guru or representative of God, he receives the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of devotional service. If he properly cultivates Krishna consciousness, he is then gradually elevated to the spiritual world. The ultimate conclusion is that one must surrender to the principles of Bhakti Yoga, for then one will gradually attain liberation. No other method of liberation from the material struggle is at all possible. Text 22. Sattvam nayatya jiditatma guna swadamna kalo bashi kriti vrajita sigarga shaktihi chakre vishishtam ajayeshwara shodashare nishpidamanam apahakshabhivo bapanam nishpidayam prapanam nishpidamana upakarshavibo prapanam. My dear Lord, O Supreme Great, you have created this material world of 16 constituents, but you are transcendental to their material qualities. In other words, these material qualities are under your full control, and you are never conquered by them. Therefore, the time element is your representation. My Lord, O Supreme, no one can conquer you. As for me, however, I am being crushed by the wheel of time, and therefore I surrender fully unto you. Now kindly take me under the protection of your lotus feet. Purport. The wheel of material miseries is also a creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he is not under the control of the material energy. Rather, he is the controller of the material energy, whereas we, the living entities, are under its control. When we give up our constitutional position, Jivira Surupahaya Krishnara Nityadas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this material energy and her influence over the conditioned soul. Therefore, he is the Supreme, and only he can deliver the conditioned soul from the onslaught of material nature. Mamevajya prapadyante Mayametam tarantite. Maya, the external energy, continuously imposes upon the conditioned souls the suffering of the threefold miseries of this material world. Therefore, in the previous verse, Prahlad Maharaj prayed to the Lord, "But for your lordship, no one can save me." Prahlad Maharaj has also explained that a child's protectors, his parents, cannot save the child from the onslaught of birth and death, nor can medicine and a physician save one from death, nor can a boat or similar means of protection save a person drowning in the water, for everything is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, suffering humanity must surrender to Krishna, and Krishna himself demands in the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, suffering humanity must surrender to Krishna as Krishna himself demands. In the last instruction of Bhagavad Gita, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja Aham Tvam Sarvapapebhyo Mokshaya Ma Shuchaha Mokshayi Shami Ma Shuchaha Mokshayi Shami Ma Shuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. All of human society must take advantage of this offer and thus be saved by Krishna from the danger of being crushed by the wheel of time, the wheel of past, present, and future. The word nishpidyamanam, being crushed, is very significant. Every living entity in the material condition is actually being crushed again and again. And to be saved from this position, one must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then one will be happy. The word prapanam is also significant. For unless one fully surrenders to the Supreme Lord, one cannot be saved from being crushed. A criminal is put into prison and punished by the government, but the same government, if it likes, can release the criminal from imprisoned life. Similarly, we must know conclusively that our material condition of suffering has been allotted to us by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if we want to be saved from this suffering, we must appeal to the same controller. Thus one can be saved from this material condition. 23. Drishtap maya divi babo kila jishnapanam ayu chiyo babavach echjadidan jaram yesmat pitu kupita hasa vijembita bru vispurjitena lulitak satute nirastaha nishpurjitena lititak satute nirastaha nispurjitena lulitak satute nirasta taha. Taha. My dear Lord, really? If it messes up the meter. If it messes up the meter. If it messes up the meter. My dear Lord, if it messes up the meter. My dear Lord, people in general want to be elevated to the higher planetary systems for a long duration of life, opulence, and enjoyment. But I have seen all of these through the activities of my father. When my father was angry and he laughed sarcastically at the demigods, they were immediately vanquished simply by seeing the movements of his eyebrows. Yet my father, who was so powerful, has now been vanquished by you within a minute. Oh. Excuse me. You see this? Why I oughta? One of these days, Alice. To the moon, Alice. This is the rehearsal. We're doing a new play at the Sunday feast. We're doing a new play, and we're just doing a little rehearsal. Dressed. That's it. Purport. They certainly can. Within this material world, one should understand by practical experience the value of material opulence, longevity, and influence. We have actual experience that even on this planet, there have been many great politicians and military commanders like Napoleon, Hitler, Subhash Chandra Bose, and Gandhi. But as soon as their lives were finished, their popularity, influence, and everything else were finished also. Prahlad Maharaj formerly gathered the same experience by seeing the activities of Hiranyakashipu, his great father. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj did not give any importance to anything in this material world. No one can maintain his body or material achievements forever. A Vaishnava can understand that nothing within this material world, not even that which is powerful, opulent, or influential, can endure. At any time such things may be vanquished, and who can vanquish them? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, one should conclusively understand that no one is greater than the Supreme Great. Since the Supreme Great demands Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamikam Charanam Braja, every intelligent man must agree to this proposal. One must surrender unto the Lord to be saved from the wheel of repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. Text 24. Tasmat amush tamarmitam aham ashishogya ayushiyam vivabam aindrim apridanchat nech chamite vilulitan uruvikramena kalat manopanayamam nijabritya parshvam Kalat mano pamane mam nijabritya parshmam. Kalat mano panaya mam nijabritya parshmam. My dear Lord, now I have complete experience concerning the worldly opulence, mystic power, longevity, and other material pleasures enjoyed by all living entities, from Lord Brahma down to the ant. As powerful time, you destroy them all. Therefore, because of my experience, I do not wish to possess them. My dear Lord, I request you to place me in touch with your pure devotee and let me serve him as a sincere servant. Purport. By studying Srimad Bhagavatam, every intelligent man can get experience like that of Prahlad Maharaj through the historical incidents mentioned in this great literature of spiritual knowledge. By following in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj, one should gain thorough experience that all material opulence is perishable at every moment. Even this body, for which we try to acquire so many sensual pleasures, may perish at any time. The soul, however, is eternal. Nahanyate hanyamane sharire. The soul is never vanquished, even when the body is destroyed. An intelligent man, therefore, should care for the happiness of the spirit soul, not of the body. Even if one receives a body with a long duration of life, like those of Lord Brahma and other great demigods, it will also be destroyed, and therefore an intelligent man should be concerned with the imperishable spirit soul. To save oneself, one must take shelter of a pure devotee. Narottam Das Thakur therefore says, Chadiya Vaishnava Seva Nishtara Paye Chikeba. If one wants to save himself from material nature's onslaughts, which arise because of the material body, one must become Krishna conscious and try to fully understand Krishna. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo vedi tatpadaha. One should understand Krishna in truth, and this one can do only by serving a pure devotee. Thus Prahlad Maharaj prays that Lord Nrsingadev place him in touch with a pure devotee and servant. Let me read that again. Thus Prahlad Maharaj prays that Lord Nrsingadev place him in touch with a pure devotee and servant, instead of awarding him material opulence. Every intelligent man within this material world must follow Prahlad Maharaj. Mahajano yena gatasapanta. Prahlad Maharaj did not want to enjoy the estate left by his father. Rather, he wanted to become a servant of the Lord. The illusory human civilization that perpetually endeavors for happiness through material advancement is rejected by Prahlad Maharaj and those who strictly follow in his footsteps. There are different types of material opulence, known technically as bhukti, mukti, and siddhi. Bhukti refers to being situated in a very good position, like a position with the demigods in the higher planetary systems, where one can enjoy material sense gratification to the greatest extent. Mukti refers to being disgusted with material advancement and thus desiring to become one with the Supreme. Siddhi refers to executing a severe type of meditation, like that of the yogis, to attain 8 kinds of perfection, anima, lagima, mahima, etc. All who desire some material advancement through bhukti, mukti, or siddhi are punishable in due course of time, and they return to material activities. Prahlad Maharaj rejected them all. He simply wanted to engage as an apprentice under the guidance of a pure devotee. He simply wanted to engage as an apprentice under the guidance of a pure devotee. He simply wanted to engage as an apprentice under the guidance of, I like the apprentice idea much better than the corporate structure. What? Say what? Say what? Say what? Apprentice. Say what? Say what? Apprentice. Inebriety. I gotta remember that. I gotta make a for the audiobook. I got it. This is really valuable. You've got to get me this. Could, could you get me this app?
One bound by indenture, see indenture, to serve another for a prescribed period with a view to learning an art or trade. One who is learning by practical experience under skilled workers, a trade, art, or calling, a carpenter's apprentice, compare journeyman, master, an inexperienced person, novice. Origin, Middle English, apprentice, from Anglo-French, apprentice, from apprendre, apprendre, to learn, from Latin, apprendere, apprendere. See, apprehend. Okay. Apprehend, arrest, seize, become aware of, perceive, to grasp, the understanding. Origin, Middle English, from Latin, apprendere, literally to seize, and from ad plus prehendere, to seize, more at get, gain possession, apprentice.
Text 25. Kutra shishak shuchikukat mrigatrishni rupa kvedam kaleva ramashishya rupirograha te nakchan vidvan kama nalam madulabai samayam paparai samayan durapai kama nalam madulai samayan durapai. In this material world, every living entity desires some future happiness, which is exactly like a mirage in the desert. Where is water in the desert? Or in other words, where is happiness in this material world? As for this body, what is its value? It is merely a source of various diseases. The so-called philosophers, scientists, and politicians know this very well, but nonetheless, they aspire for temporary happiness. Very interesting, but stupid. Happiness is very difficult to obtain, but because they are unable to control their senses, they run after the so-called happiness of the material world and never come to the right conclusion. Purport. There is a song in the Bengali language which states, I constructed this home for happiness, but unfortunately there was a fire and everything has now been burnt to ashes. Ask the people in paradise. Only 10% of the houses are left. 25 people. Huh? Paradise, California.
Cancel our Harinam last night because devotees can't go outdoors.
Smoke.
The air quality worse than
Nanadida loko trinaya karunya gunaga. This illustrates this illustrates the nature of material happiness. Everyone knows it, but nonetheless, one plans to hear or think something very pleasing. Unfortunately, all of one's plans are annihilated in due course of time. There were many politicians who planned empires, supremacy, and control of the world, but in due time, all their plans and empires, and even the politicians themselves, were vanquished. Everyone should take lessons from Prahlad Maharaj about how we are engaged in so-called temporary happiness through bodily exercises for sense enjoyment. All of us repeatedly make plans which are repeatedly frustrated. Therefore, one should stop such plan making. As one cannot stop a blazing fire by constantly pouring ghee upon it, one cannot satisfy oneself by increasing plans for sense enjoyment. The blazing fire is Bhavamaha Davagni, the forest fire of material existence. This fire occurs automatically, without endeavor. We want to be happy in the material world, but this will never be possible. We shall simply increase the blazing fire of desires. Our desires cannot be satisfied by illusory thoughts and plans. Rather, we have to follow the instructions of Lord Krishna. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braja. Then we shall be happy. Otherwise, in the name of happiness, we shall continue to suffer miserable conditions.
Miserable conditions. You're a three-talker. 26. Kwaham braja prabhava isha tamodi keshmin jata sore tarakule kwatavanu kampa na brahmano natapavasya navairamaya yanmer pita shirasi padmakara prasada yanmer pita shirasi padmakara prasada yanmer pita shirasi padmakara prasada. O my Lord, O Supreme, because I was born in a family full of the hellish material qualities of passion and ignorance, what is my position, and what is to be said of your causeless mercy, which was never offered even to Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, or the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi? You never put your lotus hand upon their head, but you have put it upon mine. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj was surprised at the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead. For although Prahlad was born in a demoniac family, and although the Lord had never before placed his lotus hand on the head of Brahma, Shiva, or the goddess of fortune, his God. This is the meaning of causeless mercy. The causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead may be bestowed eligible to worship the Supreme Lord, irrespective of his material position. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan pramabhuyaya kalpate pramabhuyaya kalpate pramabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Anyone who engages in continuous devotional service to the Lord is situated in the spiritual world and has nothing to do with the material qualities, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. Because Prahlad Maharaj was situated on the spiritual platform, he had nothing to do with his body, which had been born of the modes of passion and ignorance. The symptoms of passion and ignorance are described in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.19 as lust and hankering. Tadadrajastamo bhava kamalobhada yaschaye. Prahlad Maharaj, being a great devotee, thought the body born of his father to be born of passion and ignorance. But because Prahlad was fully engaged in the service of the Lord, his body did not belong to the material world. The pure Vaishnava's body is spiritualized even in this life. For example, when iron is put into a fire, it becomes red hot and is no longer iron but fire. Similarly, the so-called material bodies of devotees who fully engage in the devotional service of the Lord, being constantly in the fire of spiritual life, have nothing to do with matter but are spiritualized. Srila Madhvacharya remarks that the goddess of fortune, the mother of the universe, could not get mercy similar to that which was offered to Prahlad Maharaj. For although the goddess of fortune is always a constant companion of the Supreme Lord, the Lord is more inclined to his devotees. In other words, devotional service is so great that when it is offered, Even by those born in low families, the Lord accepts it as being more valuable than the service offered by the goddess of fortune. Lord Brahma, King Indra, and the other demigods living in the upper planetary systems are situated in a different spirit of consciousness, and therefore they are sometimes troubled by demons. But a devotee, even if situated in the lower planets, enjoys life in Krishna consciousness under any circumstances. Parata swata karmataha. As he acts himself, as he is instructed by others, or as he performs his material activities, he enjoys life in every respect. As he acts himself, as he is instructed by others, or as he performs his material activities, he enjoys life in every respect. In this regard, Madhvacharya quotes the following verses which are mentioned in the Brahma Tarka. Mentioned where? Shri Brahma Brahma Vindradi Tri Kalat Stri Purus Dutaha Taranye Cha Krama Deva Sada Muktao Smritavyapi Hari Bhaktao Chatajñane Sukhe Cha Niyamena Tu Parata Swata Karmatva Na Katanchit Tadanyata. Text 27. Naisha Paravaramatir Bhavato Nanusyaj Jantor Yatatma Surido Jagatas Tatapi Tam Sevaya Surataror Evate Prasada Sevanurupa Mudayo Naparavaratvam Sevanurupa Mudayo Naparavaratvam Sevanurupa Mudayo Naparavaratvam. Unlike an ordinary living entity, my Lord, you do not discriminate between friends and enemies, the favorable and the unfavorable, because for you there is no conception of higher and lower. Nonetheless, you offer your benedictions according to the level of one's service, exactly as a desire tree delivers fruits according to one's desires and makes no distinction between the lower and the higher. Purport: in Bhagavad Gita 4:11, the Lord clearly says, Ye yata mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. As one surrenders to me, I reward him accordingly. As stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivera Swaruphoy Krishnera Nityadash. Every living entity is an eternal servant of Krishna. According to the service the living entity renders, he automatically receives benedictions from Krishna, who does not make distinctions, thinking, here is a person in an intimate relationship with me, and here is a person I dislike. Krishna advises everyone to surrender to him. Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja. One's relationship with the Supreme Lord is in proportion to that surrender and the service one renders unto the Lord. Thus, throughout the entire world, the higher or lower positions of the living entities are selected by the living entities themselves. Again, thus throughout the entire world, the higher or lower positions of the living entities are selected by the living entities themselves. Arigato. Thus, throughout the entire world, the higher or lower positions of the living entities are selected by the living entities themselves. How do you all feel about that? Fair enough? No one to blame but yourself? Only lack of relationship. How do you feel about this? How does this make you feel? Seems appropriate. How does it make you feel? You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. I went down to sit and I couldn't find Why don't you try it? Thus, throughout the entire world, the higher and lower positions of the living entities are selected by the living entities themselves. I mean, that's a whole thesis paper unto itself. If one is inclined to dictate that the Lord grant something, one receives benedictions according to his desires. If one wants to be elevated to the higher planetary systems, the heavenly planets, he can be promoted to the place he desires. And if one wants to remain a hog or a pig on earth, the Lord fulfills that desire also. Therefore, one's position is determined by one's desires. The Lord is not responsible for the higher or lower grades of our existence. This is further explained quite definitely in Bhagavad Gita 9.25 by the Lord himself. Yanti deva vrata devan pitrin yanti pratirvrata bhutani yanti bhuteja yanti madhyajino pimam yanti madhyajino pimam yanti madhyajino pimam.
Confirms this by Krishna. Nadate kaschachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhu ajnanina vritam jnanam tena muyanti jantavaha. The Lord does not assume anyone's
Sinful or pious
activities. It's done because of the bewilderment of the soul.
Very nice contribution. Nice contribution. It's in the 5:15. Some people want to be promoted to the heavenly planets. Some want to be promoted to Pitriloka, and some want to remain on earth. But if one is interested in returning home, back to Godhead, he can be promoted there also. According to the demands of a particular devotee, he receives a result by the grace of the Lord. The Lord does not discriminate, thinking, here is a person favorable to me, and here is a person who is not favorable. Rather, he fulfills the desires of everyone. Therefore, the Shastras enjoin, Akama sarva kamova moksha kam udhadati tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param yajeta purusham param yajeta purusham param. Whether one is without desire, the condition of the devotees, or is desirous of all fruitive results, or is after liberation, one should, with all efforts, try to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead for complete perfection, culminating in Krishna consciousness. According to one's position, whether as a devotee, a karmi, or jnani, whatever one wants, one can get if one fully engages in the service of the Lord. Text number 28. Evam janam nipatitam pravavahi kupe kama bikama manoyam prapatam prasangat kritvat masat shurashina bhagavan grihita soham katam nu visrijeta vabritya sevam soham katam nu visrijeta vabritya sevam soham katam nu visrijeta vabritya sevam. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of my association with material desires, one after another, I was gradually falling into a blind well full of snakes, following the general populace. But your servant, Narada Muni, kindly accepted me as his disciple and instructed me how to achieve this transcendental position. Therefore, my first duty is to serve him. How could I leave his service? Purport. As will be seen in later verses, even though Prahlad Maharaj was directly offered all the benedictions he might have desired, he refused to accept such offerings from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On the contrary, he asked the Lord to engage him in the service of his servant Narada Muni. This is the symptom of a pure devotee. One should serve the spiritual master first. It is not that one should bypass the spiritual master and desire to serve the Supreme Lord. This is not the principle for a Vaishnava. Narottam Das Thakur says, Tandara charana sevi bhakta sanibas janame janame hoye abhilash. One should not be anxious to offer direct service to the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised that one become a servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. Gopi Patu Padakamalayur Das Dasa and Dasaha. This is the process for approaching the Supreme Lord. The first service should be rendered to the spiritual master, so that by his mercy one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead to render service. While teaching Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Guru Krishna Prashadi Pai Bhukti Lato Bij. One can achieve the seed of devotional service by the mercy of the Guru, the spiritual master, and then by the mercy of Krishna. This is the secret of success. First one should try to please the spiritual master, and then one should attempt to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says, Yasya prasadad bhagava prasado. One should not attempt to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by concoction. One must first be prepared to serve the spiritual master, and when one is qualified, he is automatically offered the platform of direct service to the Lord. One must first be prepared to serve the spiritual master, and when one is qualified, he is automatically offered the platform of direct service to the Lord. One must first be prepared to serve the spiritual master, and when one is qualified, he is automatically offered the platform of direct service to the Lord. Interesting that it's automatically offered. I'm just saying. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj proposed that he engage in the service of Narada Muni. He never proposed that he engage directly in the service of the Lord. This is the right conclusion. Therefore he said, Soham katam nuvisrajeta vabrityasevam. How can I give up the service of my spiritual master who has favored me in such a way that I am now able to see you face to face? Prahlad Maharaj prayed to the Lord that he might continue to engage in the service of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. 29. Mat prana rakshanam ananta paturvadascha manye swabritya rishi vakyam ratam vidatum kadgam pragrihya yadavochada sadviditsus tvam ishvaro madaparo vatukam harami tvam ishvaro madaparo vatukam harami tvam ishvaro madaparo vatukam harami. My Lord, O unlimited reservoir of transcendental qualities, you have killed my father, Hiranyakashipu, and saved me from his sword. He had said very angrily, if there is any supreme controller other than me, let him save you. I shall now sever your head from your body. Therefore I think that both in saving me and in killing him, you have acted just to prove true the words of your devotee. There is no other cause. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 9:29, the Lord says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu nami dveshosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya maite teshu chapyaham maite teshu chapyaham maite teshu chapyaham. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is undoubtedly equal to everyone. He has no friend and no enemy. But as one desires benefits from the Lord is very pleased to award them. The lower and higher positions of different living entities are due to their desires, for the Lord, being equal to all, fulfills everyone's desires. The killing of Hiranyakashipu and saving of Prahlad Maharaj also strictly followed this law of the Supreme Controller's activities. When Prahlad's mother, Hiranyakashipu's wife, Kayadhu, was under the protection of Narada, she prayed for the protection of her son from the enemy, and Narada Muni gave assurance that Prahlad Maharaj would always be saved from the enemy's hands. Thus, when Hiranyakashipu was going to kill Prahlad Maharaj, the Lord saved Prahlad to fulfill his promise in Bhagavad Gita, Kauntaya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati, and to prove true the words of Narada. The Lord can fulfill many purposes through one action. Thus, the killing of Hiranyakashipu and the saving of Prahlad were enacted simultaneously to prove the truthfulness of the Lord's devotee and the fidelity of the Lord himself to his own purpose. The Lord acts only to satisfy the desires of his devotees. Otherwise, he has nothing to do. As confirmed in the Vedic language, Natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate. The Lord has nothing to do personally, for everything is done through his different potencies. Parasa shaktir vividai vashuyate. The Lord has multifarious energies through which everything is done. Thus, when he personally does something, it is only to satisfy his devotee. The Lord is known as Bhaktavatsala because he very much favors his devoted servant. Text 30. Ekastvameva jagadettamamushya yatvam adyantayo pratagavasyasi madhyatascha Shrishva guna vyatikaram nijamaya yedam Naneva teravasitas tadanu pravishtaha. Naneva teravasitas tadanu pravishtaha. Naneva teravasitas tadanu pravishtaha. My dear Lord, you alone manifest yourself as the entire cosmic manifestation. For you existed before the creation, you exist after the annihilation, and you are the maintainer between the beginning and the end. All this is done by your external energy through actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature. Therefore, whatever exists, externally or internally, is you alone. Purport, as stated in the Brahma Samhita 535, Eko pyasara chaditum jagadanda kotim yat shakti rasti jagadanda chayai dadantaha antantarasta panamanu chayantarastam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the personality of Godhead Govinda who, by one of his plenary portions, enters the existence of every universe and every atomic particle, and thus unlimitedly manifests his infinite energy all over the material creation. To create this cosmic manifestation, Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, expands his external energy and thus enters in the universe, including the atomic particles. In this way, he exists in the entire cosmic manifestation. Therefore, the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in maintaining his devotees are transcendental, not material. He exists in everything as the cause and effect, yet he is separate, existing beyond this cosmic manifestation. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9.4. Maya tatamidang sarvam jagadavyaktamurtina mastani sarvabhutani na chaham teshavastitaha na chaham teshavastitaha na chaham teshavastitaha. The entire cosmic manifestation is but an expansion of the Lord's energy. Everything rests in him, yet he exists separately beyond creation, maintenance, and annihilation. The varieties of creation are performed by his external energy. Because the energy and energetic are one, everything is one. Sarvam kalavidam brahma. Therefore, without Krishna, the Param Brahman, nothing can exist. The difference between the material and spiritual worlds is that his external energy is manifest in the material world, whereas his spiritual energy exists in the spiritual world. Both energies, however, belong to the Supreme Lord, and therefore, in a higher sense, there is no exhibition of material energy, because everything is spiritual energy. The energy in which the Lord's all-pervasiveness is not realized, the energy in which the Lord's all-pervasiveness is not realized is called material. Otherwise, everything is spiritual. Therefore, Prahlad prays, Ekastameva jagaditam. You are everything. And we take a few reflections. You are everything. And everything is you.
I was appreciating a couple things. One is Srila Prabhupada's repeated use of the word onslaught, which is a very powerful word.
It's a powerful
onslaught.
word.
You don't hear that a lot. Onslaught. You don't hear that a lot. Except when you read Prabhupada's books. And in this chapter, he uses that. I counted like at least 5 or 6 times before I stopped. And I just reflecting that it seems like Prahlad, at least so far, in his prayers to Nrsingadev, and also in his instructions in 7.7, is very Maya conscious. He's very aware of what Maya is, his relationship to Maya, its relationship to Krishna, what it's composed of, what it means, why we should be afraid of it. It's really very much like Prakriti Tattva, very clear. Yeah, super clear Sambandha Gyan on Maya. I mean, I can hardly think of a section with more clear verses and purports. That was my take.
Nice take. Good take. Other reflections. Reflect for the benefit of the world.
I like the part where it says that we should be an apprentice of the spiritual master.
Prabhupada sent about 6 devotees in New York to learn how to do printing, because he wanted to buy his own printing press and start printing his own books.
And 6 devotees went to various companies and got apprenticeships to learn how to do the various aspects of the printing process, so that when Prabhupada bought his press, put it in Beacon Street in Boston, the first property that we ever owned in ISKCON, then they came there and they tried out what they had learned. Mukaravind, you had your hand up? We'd like to welcome Mukaravind, who's gone right into the control room. He's acting as an apprentice right now, because we have Raman and Nasaka's cooked up a whole system back there, and Mukaravind's getting up to speed. Okay.
Maharaj, in that one verse there, it says about that snake killing. So I remember when Prabhupada mentioned that once he saw that, I think in his spiritual master's place, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they were killing a snake, and that doubt he had, that how can one can kill a snake. And when he came to this section of Bhagavatam, and when he read this verse, his doubts got clear that how this is mentioned in the Shastra, that maybe.
Trisham. Thank you for that, Mukaravind. That was a very nice remembrance.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So one part of the reading was that Krishna is not favorable or unfavorable to anyone. So he's equipoised. So I was thinking that this is like a scientific process, because like it's a repeatable experiment. Anyone can follow this, and he can get the result like that. So because of that, it seems this is a scientific process, because a repeatable algorithm, kind of that you, although it's not impersonal, there's full personality of Krishna and the soul, us, but it's like you follow this, you start doing devotional service, and then you start getting results from Krishna starts to reciprocate. So in that sense, it seems like some spiritual experimental science, spiritual science.
What you're saying reminds me of what Sachinandan Maharaj was talking about today in his offering. He was feeling separation, and then he thought about taking the process very seriously. And then when he did, he noticed that the result was there. And he was thinking how potent it was, that by following the process strictly, then, the result would come. And that he was saying also that in that context that Prabhupada was, his uncanny spiritual potency was still available even after he had left. But that's a nice point, because it's something that's brought up several times here about it's the mentality of the living entity and the degree of surrender that determines his position. In fact, in one verse, if we haven't already read it, we will. Prahlad says that the Lord is like a desire tree and doesn't consider the lower or the higher. Whatever one desires, when one's under the desire tree, that it's an experiment. Maybe I mentioned this earlier, but I've been doing it at the corporate talks that I'm giving, where I take them in a guided meditation, and then I have them sit underneath it. I describe what a desire tree is, fulfills. So in their meditation, I have them go and sit under the tree, and then when they're completely relaxed and they're sitting there, and then I say, okay. And you can feel in the room, people kind of like, wait a minute. No one ever asked me that before. And then when they come out of their meditation, we ask them, so what did you want? And people who are very straightforward say, I couldn't get a handle on it. I didn't know what I wanted. They were honest, yeah. They most of them say that they had no really clear idea. And that's an interesting position, because it seems like I know where I'm going and what I'm doing or what I want, but if I actually consider it, when I'm put in a position where it'll, at least theoretically, be immediately fulfilled, and then you say, what do you want? There's a lot of pressure. It's like, I'm not sure. I want to know what to want. Hey.
Mahendra and then Nirakula.
In this regard, I wondered, as you said, that he is like a desire tree that is in the verse, and also Prabhupada in the purport said that he gives direction according to one's mentality. So it seems pretty straightforward. If, like Prabhupada explained, also if you want Krishna, he will respond like that. If you want to forget him, he will give intelligence how to do it. What in the case of a devotee who wants Krishna but also desires other things like material.
Satyam dishiti artitam artito nrinam naivartito yat punar artito yata swayam vidate bhajatam anichatam ichapitaram padapalavam. Fifth canto, we just read it, says that when one becomes a devotee and then asks for material benedictions again and again, Krishna says, this person may be a fool, but I'm not a fool. So he fulfills the material desire, but he does so in such a way that the material desire gets covered, and then the person wants to take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet instead. He's really expert like that. So that's why akama sarva kama va works. Because if you approach Krishna even with material desires, then he'll trick you. Nira Akula.
I especially gravitated towards the verse where Prahlad is saying that he didn't want anything else but to serve Narada Muni. That how could he give up that service? How could he give up that position of being a servant for Narada Muni when he had brought him to when Lord Nrsingadev had come to see him based on that? And on a couple of levels, obviously it's the highest thing you could want is the service of a pure devotee, and also the
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Okay. I like the point that this material world is created according to the desires of the conditioned souls. Material world is created by the Lord to fulfill the desires of the conditioned souls.
I just like how enthusiastic Srila Prabhupada is to echo what Prahlad Maharaj is saying in the purports and give his own realizations. It just feels like he's such like a transcendental cheerleader for the parampara. It's like, yes, Prahlad Maharaj is saying this, we must accept it. He's just blasting it out with so much fervor. It's really nice.
Cheerleader for the parampara. That's good. 1, 2. Go ahead, Madhva.
I like very much that all living beings are at positions. They are staying at positions according to their desires. Everything is very justful. May I ask a question?
Okay.
Which is about the chapter when after Hiranyakashipu was killed, the inhabitants of the different planets, they were offering prayers very thankfully. So demigods, they were saying that the process of austerity was disturbed by Hiranyakashipu, and then it was again recovered. So can we get a little bit into which exactly process of austerity was disturbed during Hiranyakashipu's reign, please?
Before we heard many things about the effect of Hiranyakashipu's influence on the material world, and the basic principle was he just turned everything upside down. All the natural laws, who were supposed to be in charge of what, he just turned it all upside down, and he took all those persons' positions, and by the strength of his austerity, he surpassed or eclipsed their austerity by his own, and by that power that he had, he nullified them or minimized them and made them more or less, useless. So it's a pretty
He took
broad.
their offerings too.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad
Yeah.
statement. Pretty broad statement, in terms of, I mean, it may have been each individual kind of austerity, was different. But the principle that he was eclipsing all of them by his austerities, which were more powerful. And it said in the beginning, remember, when he was doing his austerities, Brahma said, no one's ever done this before, and no one will ever do it again. That level of austerity.
But generally, karma kanda,
Yeah,
Yeah,
just the general
yeah,
principle
but
how he.
No, not just karma kanda. No. Even the rishis and people who were above the karma kanda, they were also forced to, Yeah, and even Narada Muni, although Narada Muni wasn't actually controlled, but he acted like he was under control. He had used to come and give offerings to him to appease him, because he was in control.
Seems like he upset the natural order of the way those the austerities that one's performed. Everything's counted and registered, but he really threw the whole thing off.
I was thinking of Bhishma. Bhishma is a Mahajan. Excuse me. I was thinking of Bhishma. He was also Mahajan, but he didn't protest when these rascals tried to, disrobe Draupadi, and he took the side of. Why is that?
He
Why?
had a philosophy, a moral philosophy that was a fallacy,
Well,
which was that you should always. Go ahead.
He was being maintained. He was a brahmachari. He was a brahmachari. Wasn't just loyal. He loved the Pandavas, but he was a brahmachari, and he was being maintained. So the rule says that if you're being maintained somebody, then you have to support that person.
Trisham.
I was just thinking about more about the experiment, the scientific process.
Yes.
And I was thinking it's a very different scientific process also, because in most scientific processes, the person who is experimenting is very much in control of the result. But here the result is not, it's definitely your part, and then there's also Krishna reciprocation.
Right.
So I wanted to
All
also
science is based on the controlled experiment. No controlled experiment, no science. Only problem is with the process of devotional service. We're always in the inferior position, so we can't. There's no control, so we have to completely submit ourselves. That's the, comparing it to the scientific experiment. It's like if you go for a job interview, and they don't really need you, you need them, then you have to submit and find out what they want and present yourself in such a way. And similarly, the whole process of devotional service is based on finding out what Krishna wants. When somebody's greater than you, then you have to appease them. And that's...
There was another time when Prabhupada said that the difference between material science and spiritual science is that the laboratory is inside, rather than putting vials and test tubes and acids and doing all these things. You have to do the work inside. The laboratory is inside. Therefore, they say it's subjective. The material scientists.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our reading. Thank you very much for joining us here on Srila Prabhupada's Tirobhava for this reading of one of his favorite chapters, most quoted verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam from Srila Prabhupada, to glorify his divine grace today by reading these and entering into the mood of being the servant of the servant of the servant. It's been an eventful day. If we had more time, we'd take realizations. Maybe we will tomorrow at some point from the talks and all the sangha that we all had during the day today. We can bring realizations. But until that time, Hare Krishna. Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Bo. Hari Bo. Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Bo. Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Vanchakalpadaruvascha Kripasinabhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Natakoti Vaishnavidiki Jai. And for those who are keeping score at home, we went over 50 pages today, which is not bad considering that the very lengthy purports, and we only had a short amount of time. But we're making good progress. This is where we are in the 7th canto, just to encourage everybody. Let's see where it ends. OMG. Look at that. That's it. This is all there is between us and Armageddon. Hare Krishna. Quoting Hillary Clinton.